So ever since Pokemon started, they've been introducing new Pokemon and new type combinations. And well, it's a fact that not every possible type combination has been used yet. And it's been like at least 20 years by now, and we've had 7 generations. There are a lot of speculations about why certain types aren't being used, but I'd like to go over every type combination that does exist and every type combination that has not been used yet. And I just made a really comprehensive chart showing the first Pokemon of every type combination and the generations that introduced them. So to get started, we have Generation 1. Fairy, Dark, and Steel didn't exist at the time. It was just the 15 types, And the only types that didn't even have a pure, monotype was Rock, Flying, Ice, and Ghost. There was no pure Pokemon of those types. And surprisingly, there aren't going to be for more years than you expect for some of those. But we do have a lot of basic Pokemon. You got your plenty of water types for sure. Some large amount of flying types. Like probably the most you see are poison, flying, and water for some reason. Yeah, you got your Pikachu, your starters of each type. And yeah, I tried my best to find the very first Pokemon of each type combination to be introduced, and it's going to be like 99% accurate. And it's interesting to see the pattern as each generation passes. So going on to Generation 2, with Dark and Steel introduced, there's a lot of those that we have now. There's a lot more flying types and a lot more water types, as you can see. Sudowoodo was the first pure rock type. Misdreavus is the first pure ghost type. Umbreon is the first pure dark type. And, but we still don't have a pure ice type or a pure flying type. Or a pure steel type, for that matter. So, yeah, with the 2 new types, it just leaves a lot more spaces to fill. And we still don't have every single combination of a single type. That'll take years from now. It's interesting to note how sometimes it would take a legendary like Articuno and Zapdos from Generation 1 to take up a spot. It's also interesting to note how they are seemingly staying away from a lot of types like Normal and Dragon for some reason. There aren't a lot of Normal and Dragon types at this point, but there are a lot of Water and Flying types for some reason. Continuing on to Generation 3, we see that they introduced a pure Steel type, Reggie Steel, a pure Ice type in Snorunt. Technically, you could say that Cast Form's Snow form is the first pure Ice type, but since that's an alternate form, I decided to be safer with Snorunt. And technically, Mawile was the first pure Steel type in Generation 3 and before that. But because it was turned into a Steel Fairy type in Generation 6, again, it seemed controversial, but I replaced it with Reggie Steel, since the Fairy type doesn't exist yet, but just to be fair, we're going to pretend like Reggie Steel was first. We have still a lot of flying types, a lot of ground types, and a lot of water types, for sure. But we still don't have a pure flying type at this point. But yeah, a lot of new Pokemon. This chart is starting to fill up. You got your Steel types growing. Lots of grass types. There's a lot of grass types at this point. And it's curious to see that sometimes the first type combo is a basic Pokemon. Sometimes it's a fully evolved Pokemon. Sometimes it's a starter. Sometimes it's a legendary. But, Continuing on to Generation 4. It fills up a lot more, especially with Rotom. Rotom introduced at least 2, if I'm not mistaken, unique forms. When it's, its original Electric Ghost Rotom and its Frost Electric Ice Rotom. For some reason, also near the bottom, we have the Mo Rotom Electric Grass and Heat Rotom Electric Fire. Yeah, those are pretty unique forms, obviously. Legendary Pokemon seem to be making a big comeback when it comes to unique typings. You got Dialga being the first Steel Dragon, Giratina being the first Ghost Dragon, and also more unique Pokemon like Empoleon being the first Steel Water, Heatran being the first Steel Fire, Lucario being the first Steel Fighting. The water rows are almost full. At this point, only 2 more Pokemon are needed to finish the water, that being Water Ghost and Water Fire, but those don't exist yet. Also, Flying only has 2 more spots to go. Flying Fighting and Pure Flying. Those are the only 2 Pokemon left to fill up Flying, but yeah, those don't exist yet either. So far, no rows are completely full, and they still haven't made a Pure Flying type at this point. But everything else seems to be filling up pretty quickly. Now, continuing on to Generation 5. Generation 5, they introduce a lot more new Pokemon, but the chart still has lots of gaps. Grass is almost full, Fire is almost full, Water is almost full, Electric is filling up nicely, Rock and Ground are filling up nicely, Flying still has 1 spot to go, Dark and Steel are filling up nicely, Ghost is filling up nicely, but we still are missing a lot of Ice types, a lot of Dragon types, a lot of Poison types, a lot of Fighting types, and a lot of normal types. It's just like they seem to be avoiding those for some reason. Electric too seems to be kind of halfway. Ground is almost full. Yeah, it's a lot to look over. And then things get more interesting in Generation 6, because Generation 6 introduced not only a new type, but also more Mega Pokemon, like the first Mega Evolutions. So Mega Evolutions, of course, will be filling up, since when it comes to the, Pokemon on this chart, I only include regular Pokemon. Pokemon forms are okay in most cases when they're, it doesn't matter. And Mega Pokemon are okay too when it comes to satisfying these things. Of course, I do not include Pokemon that only temporarily change their type using moves like Reflect type, Camouflage. Those don't count. Trick or Treat does not count. Forest's Curse does not count. Anything that changes its type into something unique doesn't count temporarily. I mean, pure Pokemon. Mega Evolutions count too. So let's go on to Generation 6. Now, Generation 6 has obviously done a lot of progress. Not only did it fill up a lot of spaces, but it added even more spaces to be filled by introducing the Fairy typing. But it did a good work of catching up. It didn't just introduce the Fairy typing but with no Fairy type Pokemon. It filled up approximately half at least for Fairy types. Of course, it seemed unfair, but a lot of the Fairy types were Pokemon from previous generations, like Jigglypuff, Mr. Mime, Gardevoir, Meryl, Cottony, just to name a few, that had different typings but were given the Fairy typing. I decided to not include those Pokemon previously. So while, for example, you could say that, Mawile is a Steel type, yeah, but because he was given the Fairy typing in Gen 6, I did not include it. And Jigglypuff changed his type, Meryl changed his type, just to name a few. Togetix line, yeah. So, thanks to Gen 6, we have finally finished 2 complete types at the same time. Water typing is now completely full, thanks to the addition of, I believe, Volcanion. Volcanion, being the first and only Water-Fire type, is the last Water type to be included, and I believe Thundurus, which was introduced last generation, Gen 5, was the second to last one in the flying group, and the first and only pure flying type is Thundurus. Or, sorry, I meant Tornadus, not Thundurus. Tornadus is the first and only pure flying type, but the final addition to fill up the flying type is Hawlucha, because it is the first and only flying fighting type. So I highlighted those rows in green, flying and water, and to this day, they're still the only full typings. Mega Pokemon made a serious contribution or actually not really that much. The only Mega Pokemon that even made a difference would have to be Mega Sceptile, being first grass dragon type. It seems to have slipped my mind. Oh yeah, Mega Altaria. Mega Altaria is probably, yeah, there's only 2 Mega Pokemon that even made a contribution to as original typings. Mega Sceptile being the first grass dragon type, and Mega Altaria being the first dragon fairy type. I also forgot to mention that Gen 5 also introduced lots of new typings, type combos, like Kyurem being a dragon ice type, or ice dragon, whatever. Whether we're talking about Gen 4, Gen 5, or Gen 6, I seem to have skipped a lot of interesting, contributions, like Gen 4's Torterra. Forgot to mention Torterra. The grass typing is almost full. Gen 5 Zekrom, electric dragon. Reshiram being not the first fire dragon, right? I seem to have forgotten. Yes. I corrected myself, and, Reshiram was the first fire dragon, and Zekrom was the first electric dragon. It seems to have been a while since I made this thing. Terrakion being rock fighting. Let's see. Hoopa being psychic ghost. That's an interesting new spot. Oh, and Gen 6 seems to have introduced a large amount of normal types that we haven't seen before. Gen 6 introduced Litleo for normal fire, and Diggersby for normal ground, and for normal electric, I believe its name was Helioptile. But then Gen 5, of course, I forgot to mention, they introduced Meloetta, which was technically normal fighting, if you count its pure wave form, as well as Deerling being normal grass. Who else did I forget to mention? Unique typings. Stunfisk is unique as electric ground. The fairies are, of course, probably one of the most unique ones, with Dedenne and Carbink being the first of their kind, and the only of their kind in Dedenne's case. But a lot of other typings are shared. Honedge is unique as being Ghost Steel. Sableye is Ghost Dark, but that was since Generation 3. I seem to be backtracking just because I like to think about when the first of each type appeared. Gen 6 introduced Inkay, the first Psychic Dark type. And yeah, it's just interesting to see all these new and old Pokemon. Now we can go on to finally Generation 7. Now, Generation 7 filled up a lot of spots, but they did not fully finish any more types. So to this point, Water and Flying are still the only types to have been complete. But in Gen 7, we have new additions, including Alola Forms. Alola Forms seems to have taken a bunch of Kanto Generation 1 Pokemon and gave them new types never been seen before, like Alolan Rattata being the first normal dark type, Alolan Raichu being the first electric psychic type, Alolan Geodude being the first electric rock type, and those are just to name 3, because it seems to take a while to notice them all. Alolan Sandshrew is the first ice steel type, and then we have non-regional variants, which are just, your usual new Pokemon. You got Mimikyu being Ghost Fairy, and Cutiefly being Bug Fairy. And I forgot to mention Alolan Ninetales being the first Ice Fairy. Good to know. When it comes to completing these rows, Fairy still has a ways to go. Dark still has 3 more to go. Steel still has only 2 more to go. And when it comes to the most unique typings, I think the most difficult ones they're trying to come up with would have to be something like Steel Poison. Yeah, coming up with Steel Poison might seem difficult, but they can figure it out eventually. Something that Steel and Poison have in common, maybe a Syringe Pokemon, maybe a Poison Blade Pokemon, something that reminds you of Bisharp, but also of Croagunk, something along those lines. Another difficult Pokemon would have to be Grass Fire. They haven't made a Grass Fire Pokemon because it seems that Grass and Fire are incompatible. But if they can get away with Volcanion being Water Fire, then Grass Fire shouldn't be too difficult. My theory is that it'll either be a Spicy Chili Pepper, based Pokemon, because that's, a hot plant, or something based along swamp gas, because that's like, grass and fire, or something else. I don't know. That's not up to me. Yeah, so grass only has one more spot to go. Dark only has 3 more to go. Steel only has 2 more to go. And I believe Dragon only has 1 more to go. Yes, Dragon has only 1 more to go, and that would be Bug Dragon. And obviously, the most popular contender would have to be Mega Flygon. People really want Mega Flygon to be a Bug Dragon type. And it just so happens that its pre-evolution, Vibrava, was the very first ground dragon, as you can see. Yeah, Psychic still has only 2 to go, which are Psychic Poison and Psychic Bug. Yeah, Bug is having trouble. Normal is probably the most empty for some reason. Well, I guess they're having trouble thinking of a normal Bug, normal Rock, normal Poison, normal Ice, normal Ghost, normal Steel. And, well, yeah, that's 7 generations of Pokemon. Now, if we count how many unused type combos there are 25 as of now. Of course, this number was a lot bigger in the past, but as time goes on, the unused spots get filled up slowly. I remember just a few years ago, before Generation 6 introduced all these regional variants and the Alolan Pokemon, and etc., that there was like a lot more unused type combos. But as of this moment, as of this video, there are 25 unused type combos, and I triple checked because it's really hard to keep track. I suspect Generation 8 might fill in a lot of these. Who knows what they will be? Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to tell. I don't think starters will be any of them except potentially if the starter's going to evolve into a Fire Fairy type. Legendaries might make sense for some of these, like Dark Fairy. I can imagine a Dark Fairy legendary Pokemon. I can imagine a Dark Fairy non-legendary Pokemon, There's a lot of interesting potential designs and concepts. I have a lot of concepts, rolling around in my mind about, the first unique typings. Oh, I also forgot to mention, Nihilego is the only Ultra Beast on here, and it happens to be the first and only Rock Poison type. Drampa was also normal Dragon, and I forgot to mention Crabominable being Fighting Ice. Yeah, there's a lot of great Pokemon on here that I forgot to mention. It's impossible to go over them all without taking forever. But yeah, take your time to look over this, and feel free to comment down below on what you think the concept or appearance will be of those 25 red spots for the unused type combos. And I look forward to reading over your comments. Please share with a friend and like and subscribe. Don't forget to check out my channel, and I'll see you guys next time.